It's Walz, baby, let's go! High school teachers stand up, public education stand up, educators stand up, young people stand up, working class people stand up. It's Walz, baby, let's go! Tim Walz in the building! Time to win in November, y'all. Let's go, all hands on deck. No staying at home. Let's go!
You know, caffeine isn't for everybody. My father-in-law, he can't do caffeine. And when he has coffee, he's got to do decaf. You know why? That video is why right there. Joining me now, Liz Collin, journalist, Alpha News, one of the few journalists left in this freaking country. Okay, Liz, the story today is not about that freak on television who needs to switch to decaf. The story today is about Tim Walz, governor of Minnesota. I don't live in Minnesota, Liz. I visited several times, but I don't live there. You do. What kind of governor is this?
Yeah, this will by far be the most radical left ticket that this country has ever seen. And there's a long laundry list as to why, as to things that Walz has done under his watch here in Minnesota. Now, no doubt about that. I know I've been on before, Jesse, but just to remind folks, put out the documentary, The Fall of Minneapolis, thefallofminneapolis.com. It's a free documentary. I encourage people to watch. Walz plays a integral part in that, just his own words, things that took place during the George Floyd riots in May of 2020. He stalled in calling in the National Guard. So instead of getting this under control, he helped to fan the flames, destroyed or damaged 1,500 businesses, $500 million in damage, police department that has dwindled by nearly a half. Not only that, though, we have some of the most radical abortion laws in the state of Minnesota. We're considered a trans refuge state. Kids can go ahead and change their gender here without parental permission if their parents refuse to give them so-called gender affirming care. We've had $250 million in fraud alone under what was known as the Feeding Our Future scandal under Walz's watch. The largest COVID-related fraud in the country. That's right here in Minnesota. Again, I could go on and on about many highlights when it comes to this guy.
Liz, if you wouldn't mind, I want to stay focused on the St. George Floyd riots. Of course, you did make that wonderful documentary. We've talked about it before, but I want to focus on Walz. I got to remember to call him Walz and not Waltz. Walz in his role in all this, because he was far from just sitting on the sidelines quietly. He was pom-pom waving for these people, wasn't he?
Oh, absolutely. There are many press conferences where he talked about, this is righteous anger, encouraging these groups to basically continue what they've been doing, making this all about, race from the beginning, when we know that race had nothing to do with this. And why then, under his watch, did they go ahead and hide the body camera footage from all four officers that were there that day? That's never happened in Minneapolis history. We also know that the Minneapolis police chief called in the FBI that night of once Facebook videos started circulating, and Walz was privy to all of that information as well. So he not only delays the response of the National Guard by several days, finally the rioting gets under control once they are called in, but then he refers to them as 19-year-old cooks. What are 19-year-old cooks going to do? When they come to Minneapolis to set up to protect people's homes and businesses. So really quite wild, the things that continue, frankly, to come out of his mouth. I know we've been busy over at Alpha News just trying to keep up with some of the radical things he continues to say.
You have been busy over at Alpha News, including reporting on pandemic fraud. What was this about?
Yeah, so this is that $250 million price tag. So basically, this is some sites that were set up fraudulently all across the metro area here in the Twin Cities. And basically, people submitting for reimbursement for meals that were never served from these sites. They were saying they were serving thousands of kids during COVID at different sites. Well, that wasn't happening. Instead, they were pocketing this money from the state and federal government and buying homes and boats, really quite wild. Nearly 70 people were charged in the wake of this this fraud, and some have now been sentenced. The first round of trials took place. During the trials, I should mention, somebody went ahead and bribed a juror, left a bag of money on their front door. These are things that you can't even make up, that have happened all under Walz' watch.
Okay, Liz, I want to ask you, you brought up the National Guard. I want to ask you about Walz's National Guard history, because stories are circulating today. I'm sure you've read them. Heck, it's you've probably reported on them, about Walz when his National Guard unit was about to deploy to Iraq. What did he do?
Yeah, so this came up back when he was running for re-election as governor, and I think Alpha News was the only outlet to even report on this. And his unit has been trying to get attention about these lies that Walz told even back then. But this is back in 2005. He was about to be deployed to Iraq. He was the highest-ranking non-commissioned officer in his unit, and he's given the role of a command sergeant major at that time. Well, about 6 weeks after getting word that he was to be deployed, he decides to retire. So leaving this unit before their deployment. So I spoke to the man who took his place, Command Sergeant Major Tom Behrens, about all of this a couple years ago. And he tried for years to get the media's attention because Walz was using the Command Sergeant Major title in Congress, in a lot of his publications when he was running for office and whatnot. And he says, this is stolen valor. He never earned that title. He left his unit. What kind of leader does that? So finally, it does seem that Walz has backed away from that title, but this went on for years as this group from his unit has become more and more vocal to say he's never been a command sergeant major. And even in his paperwork, it does show that he was reduced to an E8 master sergeant, and that's how he retired from the National Guard. So there are just so many lies when it comes to Governor Walz. But sadly, we have a media in Minnesota that doesn't really call him on any of this at all. You have these guys from this unit that wrote to the Star Tribune and tried to talk to these network reporters, and none of them were interested in this story at all.
Liz, how does this guy get elected in Minnesota? Now, I understand Minnesota's not a red state, probably not even a purple state, but it's not freaking California. It's not Connecticut. It's not that. But this guy's on camera praising socialism. How does he get elected?
It is amazing. He's a bit of a chameleon. I think that has shown. He's not from here. His wife has ties to this area. He left Nebraska after getting a DUI and lying to the police, going nearly 100 miles an hour, saying he was deaf in one ear. There's a long story about all that. So he was fired as a coach and educator back then after, I think, blowing a .12 during that DUI, and then having to kind of start all over in Minnesota, where he was an educator in Mankato. It's interesting, even his congressional district, this area that covers Mankato, where he was a teacher for nearly 20 years, did not vote for him again as governor, because they got to know him and they were sick of, how he would flip-flop and, just be this different person. So in many ways, this pick does seem to make sense because he has been manipulated before. I don't think really anybody knows who the real Tim Walz is.